Okay, guys and gals, jack up your car and get your tools ready before you start. Those are the primary things you got to do first. Now let's get started. First, we're going to soak the bolt with liquid wrench, and after it soaks for about 10 minutes, we're going to take a 6mm Allen wrench, and then we're going to undo the bolt, but not all the way. We just leave it on there for now. Okay, moving on to the rattle clips. You want to stick it into that little hole there and in the center, and we're going to pry it in opposite directions. See that little hole there? Just get that tool in there, pry it, and the screwdriver, and it should pop right out. Now we're going to move on to the caliper and the caliper carrier. Now I've already taken one of the caps off, and we're going to move on to this other cap here. Then we're going to use a 7mm Allen wrench to break open the caliper bolts. It's a 7mm and also a T45, I believe. Here I'm using my knee pushing against my elbow, which is pushing against the wrists against the Allen wrench. It's a jiu-jitsu technique to multiply force. Again, this is a T45 we're going to use to take the caliper off. And we need to take that caliper off in order to access that bolt that is behind that brake fluid wire. So in order to take the carrier off, we have to first take the caliper off to access that bolt. Once that caliper bolt is loosened, we can take it out and unscrew it by hand using the T45 Torx bit. And then sometimes it's stuck, so we'll use the screwdriver to pry it loose. And pads will fall out. Once the caliper is detached, we're going to hang it up with the bungee cord so it's out of the way. Then we use a hex socket, a 16mm hex socket with a ratchet to undo that bottom caliper bolt. And once we remove that caliper bolt, we can then use a 16mm flat ratchet to undo the top one. Remember, when you replace the bolt, use a blue or a medium strength thread lock. And here's our flat ratchet, 16mm. And there's our caliper carrier. After removing the caliper carrier and the caliper, we're going to use a rubber mallet to beat on the inside of the rotor towards the outside, as well as the face of the rotor hub, just to loosen the rust that has accumulated in the contact surfaces. After we loosen the rotor a bit, we'll take the 6mm Allen wrench and completely remove the Allen bolt that holds the rotor to the wheel bearing. Now we're going to take some liquid wrench and spray the holes of the hub, and we're going to beat a little bit on the rotor, and boom, that came out pretty easy. The driver's side on this car was really baked in, so it was much more difficult. Now we're going to use a 5mm Allen wrench to remove the placeholder bolt that holds the parking pads in place. You just kind of twist it, click, and it comes right out. It's spring loaded and it's keyed, as you can see there. And we'll do the same with the bottom. Boom. There we go. I'm going to clean off a little bit some of that brake dust Now you can see it faces only one direction, and the pads match up to the gearing there only one way, so it's pretty self-explanatory. Now we've loosened it. We can't take it out yet because of the springs holding it in, but at least we can manipulate it. And don't forget your goggles, safety goggles, when you're taking this the springs out. I'm going to start with the lower spring. We just kind of stick it in there and pry it out, and I'll show you the other angle in a minute how it comes out. It comes out pretty easy with that little pick tool. There you go. Now when you're placing these, there we go. Yeah, you just put it in there and you pry it out, and it pops out pretty easy. But when you're placing these, you want to place them in the same orientation as when you took them out, so that you minimize the mistakes when you reinstall. Now this is the other side, the other angle, and show you how this is put together. You see that spring there? It comes right out, and this little lever will unclip that there, and there you go. So the teeth fit in one way on the top there, and that little notch. Right, just kind of memorize that. And then that big notch is on the bottom, like that. We'll just take that out. Now let's do the reverse and install the new pads. Now again, this is a keyed little bolt that holds and stabilizes the pad to the, I guess, the wheel bearing, you'd call it. We just kind of put it in there and turn it until it clicks. You want to install this first before you install the springs, because if you install the springs first, it will be extremely difficult to align those pins because they're spring loaded. Again, this thing is facing down, the gear is facing down, and it mates up just the way you see it there. It only goes one way, so don't be afraid. The fat side is on the bottom. I'm going to put the bottom latch on there. There we go. We want to align those lips eventually. Here I'm trying to get that little gear to, the adjuster gear to mate up with the mouths. It's kind of loosey-goosey, but it'll work itself out once you put the springs back in. Here we go. Now we're going to put the spring on. Let's see here. Yes, I'm just prying it until it falls in place. Let me zoom in here. See how it goes in there? Now, it might not click in, so you might have to get a screwdriver or two, or have to, you know, fandangle it until it goes click. And so it still didn't go in, but you'll see it when it goes in. It'll fall right in. It'll go click. See how flush it is? And then we're going to go on the bottom. And remember, the little teeth goes on the top, and the fatter one goes on the bottom. That little hook there goes into that notch towards the outside, and then you'll close it. Boom. And then you'll hook it up to the upper notch and pull the bottom fat notch and place it in until it clicks in place. Then after that, you will add the spring with a similar technique as the top spring. Now that bottom spring, I'm going to put the bottom one first because it's the more difficult location. All right, now we're going to take the screwdriver, stick it in like that, put it in the hole, and stretch it, and then it should fall right in place. Gotta make sure that screwdriver is small enough to fit in that hole though. There you go. And I want to make sure everything is aligned and flush. Now we're going to put some anti-seize, copper anti-seize on the hub face, and then we're going to put the rotor back on. If you need to take it out again in the future, you won't have to use a hammer. We finish bolting these on, and then we apply anti-seize on the hub face. And then we are going to install the caliper carrier. There we go. And remember, put the blue medium strength thread lock. We're going to thread it on by hand first. Notice the bungee cord is being stepped on by my foot to keep the caliper itself from wobbling and getting in the way. Now wiggle it to get that bolt in there. And we're going to do a fast motion there. Now that's the 16 ratchet. Then we're going to use the socket on the bottom. And always use the proper torque values, which will be listed in the description box. I think the carrier to the wheel is 65 Newton meters, and the caliper to the carrier is 67 Newton meters. And that hub Allen bolt to the wheel is 16 Newton meters. And the guide bolt is like 30 Newton meters. Right here I'm using a little pick or a screwdriver to loosen and disconnect the brake sensor without breaking it, because I want to take that brake pad out. Reason is I'm going to use this tool here to compress the brake piston fully open position so that it will be easy and possible to put the brake caliper with the brake pads back onto the rotor. And when you do this, you got to make sure that you open up the front brake fluid reservoir, or else it may damage your system. Now we're putting the brake pad back on, and it should have enough clearance. Oh, and don't forget to put the brake lube on. All contact surfaces. Do not put any brake lube, of course, on the brake pad itself where it meets the rotor. That would be retarded. And now we put the caliper guide bolts back on with the 45 millimeter or T45 Torx. So there's a guide bolt. We want to put some lube on there, and we're going to use 30 Newton meters to torque that down. You'll notice I am not using any torque wrenches in this particular situation. That's because I actually know by hand, by feel, how much force to tighten these things, because I've done this job so many times. Now we put on the brake sensor back. And now we want to snap back on the anti-rattle clips. And they're much easier to reinstall than they are to remove. Now all we got to do is put those caliper bolt caps back on, and then put the tire and wheel back on, and we're done. Hey, thanks for sticking around and watching this video. If you like it and you want to see more, press the subscribe button. It'll help me out a lot. And I hope this helped you out. And I'm looking forward to making a lot more videos for you guys.